It is known, of course, that there are two versions of the so-called Aseret HaDvarim or Aseret HaDibrot. As I mentioned in another video, it's not to be translated as 10 commandments. It's not Aseret HaMitzvot. It's 10 sayings, 10 statements maybe. The two versions are one in this week's Parsha, in Parshat Yitro, and the other is when Moshe, at the end of the 40-year period, will be repeating the Torah in the last month of his life before the Jewish people. By the way, now is the time. It says in the beginning of Book of Dvarim that Moshe started repeating the Torah on the first of the 11th month, which is what we call the month of Shvat. So right now, these are the days when Moshe was repeating the Torah and telling some ethical statements, Musar, and blessing the tribes. All of this happened within a month and 7 days or so. The Torah nowhere openly says which day Moshe died on, but Chazal calculated to be on the 7th of Adar, or close to that day, based on what happened afterwards, what's recorded in Sefer Yoshua. So Moshe started the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Dvarim. He started it on the 1st of Shvat and ended with his death on the 7th of Adar. So when Moshe is repeating the Torah closer to the beginning, in the second of the Parshiot of Sefer Dvarim, Parshat V'Etchanan, he repeats the 10 commandments, the 10 sayings, the 10 Dvarim. And guess what? Of course, as everybody knows, there are some differences between the two versions. And one of the main differences is when it says on Shabbat, in our Parsha, it says Zachor, remember the day of Shabbat. And in Sefer Dvarim, it says Shamor, you should keep the Sabbath. And it also gives a different reason. That here it says that Hashem created the world and rested on Shabbat, and that's why we keep Shabbat. And in Sefer Dvarim it says because you were slaves in the land of Egypt, so you and also your servants, everybody has to rest on the seventh day. Now, the known opinion of our sages, of Chazal, is that in some sense, in prophetic vision, the Jewish people heard both of these, Zachor and Shamor, simultaneously. This is possible, of course, only in prophetic vision. Normally one cannot hear two things at the same time, but in prophetic vision they understood the two aspects of Shabbat at once. And the two aspects are, according to the Zachor, would be the positive part of Shabbat, all the ways will make Shabbat special. For instance, Kiddush, Havdalah, wearing special clothing, in general behaving on Shabbat like on a holiday, on a special day. And Shamor would be then the keeping of the Shabbat, making sure not to do any work. Now that in itself, there are actually two aspects. The positive commandment to rest on Shabbat and the negative commandment not to do work on Shabbat. They're not exactly the same, they're not identical. According to some Rishonim, for instance, if a person opens a business on Shabbat but doesn't specifically do any mlacha, one of the 39 works, so he doesn't write, he doesn't turn on electricity, he's just going to buy and sell all day without doing any of the 39 mlachot. He will still be over, he will be breaking the positive commandment to rest on Shabbat. So according to this opinion, resting is not the same as not doing work. There are specific works, and there is a general concept of rest, even if it doesn't fall in specific work category. But I'm not going to go into this right now. So at any rate, Shamor includes resting, and Zachor includes making this day special. Sometimes you keep Shabbat in a certain sense even on weekdays. When you prepare for Shabbat, you always remember Shabbat, not to pass it, not to end up on Shabbat without food, for instance, right? If you don't remember about Shabbat, then all of a sudden you may end up right before Shabbat with nothing. So you have to remember Shabbat. Some sages, even on the first day of the week already, prepare themselves for Shabbat in case they see something, for instance, a specific food that might be rare. In those times, I guess it wasn't always possible to buy good food, so if they see some kind of nice food, they'd already buy it, having in mind to eat it on Shabbat. The fact that we count the days of the week from Shabbat, Midrash brings that's also remembering Shabbat. Meaning in Hebrew, there are no Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays. They're all day after Shabbat. The first day after Shabbat, the second day after Shabbat. I work as a programmer, and it's interesting, we have a colleague of mine, a Japanese person, I was asking me, because he deals with the translations of our program into various languages, including Hebrew. He was so surprised that in Hebrew it seems like weird the way he's asking me how they have these tables with translations and how the days of the week work in Hebrew, because in other languages they actually have proper names, and in Hebrew it's just a number after Shabbat. So anyway, the opinion of Chazal is quite clear. We heard both Zachor and Shamor at once in a prophetic vision. But what about the Luchot? What about the 2 stone tablets that Moshe brought down? So according to the Talmud in Bava Kama, the first version of Luchot had what we have in our Parsha, in Parshat Yitro, and the second Luchot, the ones he brought down, we'll be reading in Parshat Kitisa, those ones had the version of the 10 Devarim, Aseret HaDibrot, that are mentioned in Parshat V'Etchanan. Very interesting approach, and by the way, not clear at all, not really agreed upon by all the commentators. It's not clear at all that the Luchot actually differed. But that's the opinion of Stam Gemara and Bava Kama, that the 2 versions of the Aseret HaDvarim written on stone were actually the 2 versions that we have in the 2 Parshiot that mention these 10 sayings. And on this I'm going to end for today. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.